Hi, my name is Sangeeta Kumar, and I'm the CEO and founder of Be the Change Consulting. Join me in Liberated AF, the workplace revolution. This is a podcast where we get to explore what does it take to become the organization that we want to work for. So what is that? The organization I want to work for, it supports my humanity and makes me feel like I belong. It's a place that isn't racist, it isn't extractive. It works for the boomers and the Gen Alphas. There's space for everyone to bring their genius to work. Don't we want to become that? And don't we want to create that? So I have been studying organizational dynamics for over 20 years, and I love working with teams stuck in an entrenched challenge to bring clarity to diverse perspectives and look for ways that human-centered systems. We're going to tell stories, we're going to answer questions, we're going to offer strategies on this podcast. Together, we are going to become something new. Let's go.
Good morning, Sangeeta.
Good morning.
I just received your newsletter around, how you're feeling and what's coming up for you for the state of DEI. Do you want to share a little bit more about the context of that newsletter in case we have some listeners who didn't get a hold of it?
Yeah, I mean, the world of DEI, the weather, right? The climate has so dramatically shifted. Um, People who just a couple months ago were like, this is the right thing to do, or not even this is the right thing to do. I think folks who are like, this is the right thing to do are like wavering a lot more. Then we need to do this. We need to do this because we want to retain the best talent, and we want to make sure that our people aren't dimming their light and they're bringing their highest selves to, to work.
Mm,
And it's really sad, I think the federal government is the way they're attacking the principles of inclusion
yeah.
makes it's really like making DEI seem like a bad use of resources,
Mhm.
and as though it's disproportionately supporting, marginalized groups of people at the expense of white folks. And that's not what, DEI is is about at all. And yeah, but I'm also so that was our newsletter was about, right? It was like just kind of helping to delineate that our work is really about creating organizational resiliency, like
Mm,
strong organizational cultures where lots of different divergent viewpoints can come together, bounded by systems and structures and strong organizational culture, but that diversity is not a liability, right? It can actually like help make things better. Diversity in our ecosystems, right? If we look at where it shows up in nature, like diverse ecosystems actually like can sustain fires, can sustain harsh conditions. And so like that's what resiliency is, right? That's where that idea of resilience came from. It's not like us like I feel like sometimes people take these words and they weaken them as though we're talking about like self-care and
mhm.
yoga, or like, not that those things are bad, but these are about actually strengthening an organization, not about things feeling good for everyone.
Yeah. It's interesting, because everything that you're saying makes sense, but then to different ears, they would be like, "What are you talking about?" And um, I feel like DEI, the words have been weaponized, right? And so
Yeah.
those who are listening, they believe the words. And in our work too, we work with a lot of young people, and when we ask them about what do you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and those students who have experienced the diversity of an ecosystem, they're just like, oh my gosh, we need it to thrive. Like it's no nonsense, right? It's like they've experienced and they understand it. And so this idea of weaponizing DEI to those folks who have not experienced this or does not want this. Like I think about like it all the time. It's like who's saying the words and who are they saying it to so that they can believe it. Um and we can continue to talk about this, and that this particular topic in the episode today we'll unpack that question too, is like this idea of weaponizing DI, and also, casting fear and nervousness and anxiousness. And you mentioned at the very beginning where you're like, there's some folks who are doing this work because they felt like it was the right thing. And then there's some folks who are like, it is this is something we need to do, right? It's not right versus need, but it's like, it's the right thing and we need to do it. Recently, we've had a lot of communications from different clients, and I, would like to invite you to share a little bit, what happens when a leader, an organization comes to you and they've invested in a lot around this equity training, right? Maybe 2 or 3 years initiative, but they still see problematic behavior within their teams and within their organizations.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens, right? So people invest in trainings, and we're an organization that helps people kind of create a strategy, identify what's the behaviors they want to see shifted, maybe establish a couple of competencies that they want to hold people accountable to. And then, right, so from strategy, you establish expectations, and then from expectations, you do trainings to teach the expectations. And then a lot of folks are like, I've done these trainings. These expectations should now be embodied in the people who went through the training. They should be
Yeah.
able to incorporate what we train them on and start behaving differently. Right. So that kind of
Yeah.
makes sense. Um, and then, yeah, we have people who then get really disappointed when they're like, okay, somebody totally, like, after going through all this training, somebody totally messed up. And now we have to like, how could
Mm,
they have done this? How could, and it happens on anything, right? Like
right.
equity training is one thing where, let's just say, what is a equity competency? Maybe the competency is to shift our supervision practices from being directive, where the supervisor is sort of like using their check-in times to um, oversee an employee's work,
Mm,
um, to becoming more like a coach and asking them, like, to be more relational in your supervision and to trust that there's a person who has wisdom and wants to do a good job, because doing a good job, it makes your job easier.
mhm.
Enjoying your work makes it easier to come to work every day. And if you're a supervisor who can help someone feel like they enjoy their work and feels trusted and invested in, you're going to get
Yeah.
more from that employee than if you're kind of top down micromanaging, sort of directing, telling them what to do versus making it conversational, right? So a competency could be to have a relational approach to supervision. And so then let's say an employee gives some feedback that, I feel like my boss is micromanaging
Mm,
me and it's actually creating a hostile work environment. And we get a lot of calls from folks who are now like that kind of, once somebody says is a hostile work environment, right? It becomes like a different level of liability. It becomes a,
mm,
and so now what happens? Maybe HR has to get involved. And if HR is the people who've been investing in these trainings or seeing these trainings happen, they can feel frustrated, right? Like, how
yeah.
come this mistake happened? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I feel like we often see kind of three groups of people within an organization, right? Folks
Mhm.
who are already kind of aligned with the vision of what you are training them on. So in this case, with this equity principle of being more relational in supervision, there's gonna be a bunch of people that are like, of course we would do that. That feels so much less stressful than top down micromanaging directive, right? Um, so people who like the idea, and that could be people who are currently supervisors or people who are being supervised, and they're like, yeah, I would way rather have a boss that did that. So there's one group, right? Those who are already aligned with what you're teaching on and are relieved to see it being taught on and are like, thank God this is being sort of broadly socialized. So that's one group. And then there's people who are encountering this principle for the first time. Right, they're like, "Wait, what? A relational approach to supervision? Like, I thought my job was to make sure people got their work done, not to be their friends, not to, like, be chatting with them. Like, what are you talking about? I've never had a supervisor do that to me, and I've been a professional for 20 years." So if you've been, like, working for 20 years and not receiving this approach, and now you're
Right.
being asked to turn around and deliver it to someone else, you don't know what it is. The ideas don't even kind of match what you've been conditioned to believe supervision is, and so you don't know how to do it. And so you're in that training. What's happening for those people? They're probably sitting in that training, interrogating the ask, right? Interrogating that invitation, the competency to begin with.
Right.
And so if the rest of the training is like teaching skills and tools and modeling things and like showing you how to do it, but those folks are still back here like debating with whether we should do this or not, right? Which is kind of what's happening. What I think has happened for a long time with DEI work.
Yeah.
You got people early in a training who are like, what are we doing this for? And that why question doesn't get answered. Then they sit through the training for the next couple hours and that first question didn't get answered. And so like nothing else really like goes in, right? Like does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then I think there's a third group of people. So those are people who are kind of like questioning, right? And I think if we can meet that group, right? That's I think our job as trainers is to try to really like assess from the group, are we ready to move forward? Have we accepted the premise and now we're ready to move into how do we operationalize or embody these skills? That's our work. That doesn't always happen, right? Because sometimes the delivery is more like it's very PowerPoint driven or you're being kind of talked at and there isn't as much space for back and forth, or it feels scary to ask the question. It feels scary to question it, right? To be like, wait, why are we doing this? And I think that's also what's happening right now in this climate is people who've been holding this question are being emboldened to ask. And we have to be able to have good answers to why we're doing this. And sometimes people who deeply believe in it, like they feel it, but they can't articulate the why. And so then, right, so that's an opportunity. That's like a second group. And that group, I feel like you can bring them along if we can meet their resistance and sort of like address it. And then I think there's a third group who are legitimately resistant to these ideas and who are like, nope, I'm not going to do that. My power or my sense of identity as a director or a supervisor comes from being able to, like, I like to have a lot of direct reports and I like to tell people what to do. And why would I, right? Why would I become a friend to these people? I don't want to be friends with these people, whatever it is, right? So their brain is like, no, thank you. I'm not going to do it. So I think the greatest indicator of success in a system is how that system responds to that third group. Those resistors. And we could generalize this idea of resistors to like people who, let's say this organization is rolling out a new project management system. And there will be people who are like, nope, I'm not going to use this new system. I have my own system and I like the way I take my notes. And we saw that, right, in our organization. It takes a long time to do the behavior change to shift systems. Or someone who's like, we want to create a more restorative approach to conflict. And so, right, so you can have resistors on many different things. It doesn't just have to be like equity trainings. And so I think when the organization enforces accountability through supervision, through HR processes, and clear like disciplinary accountability measures, which sometimes will require disciplinary measures. Like if they do that well early on, it's going to reinforce the idea that what's taught in this training is non-negotiable. Or what, we're establishing these competencies and we're not wiggling on them. We're not going to back off of them. And that's how culture begins to shift, right? So we have to kind of say what our expectations are. You have to train people into those expectations. That training needs to include some space for dialogue and debate so people can kind of work with points of resistance and feel convinced for themselves. And then you get trained on the tools and the behaviors that you expect to see. And then it has to be modeled, from the people around you, including the bigger systems. And those systems have to hold people accountable. And what I think happens sometimes in equity trainings is people aren't held accountable. So you can invest a ton of money in delivering the training, thinking that the training is the end result, is the last step in your work. But the training is, step 3 of 6 steps. And so when when you see those resistors and you don't pull them aside and say, hey, I get that you don't like this idea. I get that, something about this hasn't resonated with you for you yet, but you don't get to make your own, you're not creating all the policies here. There are lots of things that this organization asks people to do that, maybe people want more vacation than what they're given, but we don't let them take more vacation than they want, than they're given, right? But with equity work, sometimes we soften the accountability practice, which then sends the message to people that these are not actual things that I have to do. And then it
Would
gets
you
really
that
disappointing.
well, so I have a couple so many things to say
Okay.
in how you broke it down, but let me just go off with this last thing. The softening of the accountability. Why do you think, right? Why do you think an organization that has invested so much money and time, going through the process, they don't have, well, I'm going to use some of the language that you're saying is like they don't have the expectation, skills, or competencies to hold true accountability? Because we've seen that. We've seen folks bring us in, they have the strategy, they visualize the expectations, they name the skills, and they talk about the competency. That's the North Star that we want to build, right? And then, we come, we leave, and then we get emails from folks who are getting coaching and consulting, and they're unable to hold the accountability at any of the groups really. Like, yes, they're resistors, but the folks who are in the middle group that's confused, that's questioning, they're not quite on it. And then I even think that the folks who are aligned and ready for this vision because they're waiting for this to happen, they're going to feel some sort of way because the resistors are so loud too.
Right.
So
Right.
some
And so then those resistors get a lot of power.
yeah. So like what happens there? Do you think it's because leaders are going like, and this is what I think, right? I think that because DEI doing this work and creating an inclusive, diverse, and ecosystem organization where everyone can thrive, it's not a competition or a race, like you said, right? Like the training is the end game. It's not the case because we all haven't been socialized to
Hmm.
do this. It's a journey. It's a starting point. You get to a point, you pause, and you're like, okay, where do we go next? But I think that's also where I believe DI has also been weaponized. It's like, okay, we signed on to the initiative. Let's do the trainings and this and that, and we should be ready to go. And then without realizing that there are these three groups and there might be more, and you don't see results, you don't see the end of the race right away, then you're like, oh yeah, this stuff is all fluff. This stuff doesn't work. Like it's such a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just seeing that those things are connected, right? Holding people accountable is part of what makes your trainings like meaningful.
Yeah.
And that is true on anything, right? If we introduce a new project management tool and we're like, you're gonna track your work through this system, and
Mhm.
one person doesn't do it, it's not going to be possible for a team to use that tool because
Yeah.
someone's information is not there. And the training by itself is one thing, and then you're going to have to look at the people who adopt quickly and say, great, you're off to the races. You guys are the people who are going to be modeling the new culture
Mm.
and the expectations that we want to see. So then what I should do as a leader, if I was a leader, is to say, thank you, Fong, for, I saw you put all of those notes into Monday.com. It's so, I was able to find what I needed right away.
Mm.
Or to hold a staff meeting and to open up Monday.com and say, okay, here's our dashboard. Here's what we're able to see because everyone's putting their information into this tool. So I have to also then show like, what is the value? How is this tool increasing our efficiency and our ability to collaborate and make meaning out of something? And then let's say there's one person who's like, yeah, I don't believe in tools like this. I have a paper calendar and I leave my paper calendar. I need my paper
Yeah.
calendar. Like that's the only way I work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That person, now what does that person need, right? That person needs to be pulled aside and we get to do some coaching. What are your, okay, do you know what we're asking you to do? Have you tried to do it? A lot of times when people aren't doing something, it's because they just don't know how to do it.
That's
And
right.
they're scared. They're scared to try and they're scared to fail. And they would rather be seen as stubborn than somebody who's flailing. And
Mhm.
so then we get to interrogate, right? Or ask ourselves the question, what is the culture in our organization around learning? Are we a learning organization, or are we like an organization that says we expect you to perform, from the moment that we're telling you what to do, we want to see that you're successful,
Yeah.
versus we're introducing this thing. We're introducing this new competency for supervisors. We expect it's going to take you 6 months to like slowly shift and evolve and adapt your processes. And here's what the stairway to get, to the top looks like. We're not expecting you to leap all the way up 10
Mhm,
flights of
mhm.
stairs. But this week, try a check-in with your employee. Ask them, how do they like to get feedback?
Yeah.
And just 5 minutes at the beginning of your check-in, right? So how do we break it down into the bite-sized practices? So in that coaching session, right, when I pull somebody aside, I might be able to say, have you tried step one?
Mhm.
And if you haven't tried step one, then we could say, all right, that's your next project, is to try step one. And
Mm.
I want you to try it in the next week, and then text me or email me and let's talk about what happened for you. And if we give people little steps, I think they're more likely to take action.
Mm.
And then let's say they still don't. Let's say we haven't given them a tiny step and we're just noticing their resistance. It's going to be harder to hold them accountable to something, because the gap between what they are used to doing and what we're asking them to do feels like a chasm to them, and they're not able to leap it.
Oh my gosh, I
So I
feel like
think
it like a visual is so needed at this point because okay, so you're giving us without even realize I don't think you're giving a strategy already for those who are out there who have invested time and money in doing this equity work and getting pushed back and seeing that like you said to name the expectations, to name the skills, and to practice the competency because to be competent in something takes time and especially if it's so new. And so I think for some leaders, that competency right there has like that this is where I want a visual, right? And if there's like those 3 groups, you can say everyone's entering this
mm,
journey at a different point. And so the person who is the resistor, right? Like their movement, like their how far they're gonna get is gonna look very different than the person who's super aligned with the vision and they're running, right? So we got the runners, we have the joggers, and this person's like, I'm gonna put one toe in. And so I like what you're saying there is like, this is the step 1 from our strategy, try it out. Okay.
mhm.
Haven't tried it out, why? And giving them the support, the coaching. And then I like that at the thing that you had said with the accountability. Okay. You have to try this. This is the first step and tell me what it's like and giving him to bite size. What else then? What else if, if some of the listeners who are listening right now, they're like, this is totally me right now. I just got a bunch of emails. I just sat in my supervision training and like people are saying things they shouldn't be saying, writing things they shouldn't be writing, like creating a culture that is nothing aligned to what we learned in these equity trainings.
I would maybe make a list, right? Of what am I seeing? What do
Mm,
I want to see? So if I think, oh, people right now are saying this, what do
mm,
I want to hear them saying? Right. So I think the first step is, do I even have a very clear picture?
yes.
Is there a mental movie in my mind of the behavior that I want to see? Because a lot of times we can see what we don't like, but we don't know what we do want.
Right. And if you don't know what you want, how can you hold accountability?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's one, right? And then the
Okay,
second is, am I modeling it?
yeah.
I see it happen a lot that people are like, I want to see you be more relational in your supervision. And that is a directive,
Right.
right? And so, like, if I'm giving you a directive that is in opposition, or you are seeing me do things that you're like, but you're not doing that. So you're
Right.
asking, so, okay, right? So I think a lot of our work is like, let's look at ourselves, right? Who's in
Mhm.
charge? Let's see where is the problem me? Anytime I find like where the problem is me, it's a bummer, right? Like I don't want
Yeah.
to be the one who's the problem. And every place where I'm like, "Oh, this is me," that I have a lot of control over. And so I think
Do you really? Do you? Because if you're bumming out that you're like, "Oh, man, it's me again." Tell me how I take control over that.
I mean, I think that's a journey, right? That is like, I think,
Right.
a spiritual practice of like getting to the place where I'm not defensive enough that I can be like, "Oh man, I'm bummed out about this," right? So one is I can have empathy for myself. It's a
Mm.
bummer. I'm getting this feedback, it hurts, or I think some of this is on me, or I didn't do this quite right. Okay. If we don't name that, then the chances that I blame somebody else for what they're not doing unfairly is high, right? And it's not always that it's me, but let's start
Right.
with that work, right? What of this is me, and can I find any piece, right, that I could better model? So that could be one move. So do I know? Do I have a clear set of what the behaviors are that I want to see? Am I modeling those behaviors consistently and effectively? Do we have a culture where we're talking about the things that we want to see? Do you know what I mean? Like, there are places, like, where someone will say, like, "We want you to stay home if you're sick." But then someone comes to work, and you can tell that they're not feeling all that well. I've done this, and I'm like, "But I really need you to get this thing done."
Mhm.
So, like, I've said it at some place, like, "Stay home if you're sick," and then in the moment where I'm like, "Oh, this person is coming to work, and they shouldn't be at work."
Mm.
Am I holding myself accountable to that expectation? Um, if my employee isn't, right? And that requires some reinforcing of like, "Oh, you're not feeling well. We should find another time to do this. Let me figure out how we handle the implications of the fact that you're not feeling well." That's
Mhm.
not necessarily just your job. Like, it's hard for sometimes people to practice these new expectations if it isn't actually being reinforced structurally consistently. And I think that happens, right? We want relational supervision if we're using that example. It
Mhm.
works as long as that person that we're supervising is really self-reflective and is pretty self-motivated and is pretty good at their job. But as soon as you have someone who's kind of confused and is like, you know, not quite nailing it,
Mm.
then what are my moves, right? How do I actually shift someone's behavior or practice from a relational place? And a lot of us don't know how to do that. We know how to do it when it's working well, but when there's a problem, then we might move back to that top down, like, just get it done. It's because I said so. We don't have time to discuss this. Just trust the process. Trust me, right? Those are like good words that could help us catch. It helps me kind of notice like, "Oh, maybe I don't know how to explain what I want, and I just want it done. And
Mhm.
now I'm not bringing this person along." I don't know that
I
we
think
can always do that, but I think if that's
no,
like
I that's a start, and I also think that in creating the strategy, naming the expectations or the value, why are we doing this, equity and inclusion work, and then getting really sharp on this is the skill that we want to practice. And I think in that fourth piece, the competency piece, is where we have to get more explicit around this is what we want and this is what we probably don't want. Because I think in that competency, and I think about learning anything when you're embarking on something and you're trying to get strong at it, there are going to be moments where you hit those hiccups or you trip and you fall. So I don't know. I think that maybe that's because when you can name that collectively, it's in the air, it's in the culture. And so, like,
Mhm,
everything, right? From, like, holding accountability, it's not doesn't fall just on the leader or the supervisor, but it's the collective. Because, like you said, it's like people are feeling what they want, but they don't have the words, or they can see what they want or in their mind, right? They're like, "A world could be like this, or a workplace could be like this," but they've never experienced it. They've only been socialized and seen it in so many other ways that could be not so different, right? So
mhm.
I just think that maybe in that fourth piece where from working with these organization, and I've seen you do that, is like naming like the competencies and the different levels in which it's going to show up, and it's going to look differently for the first group and the second group and the third group.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's okay, right? For that 3rd
Yeah.
group, it's going to require some like, a courageous conversation, and so if you're like,
Mm.
"Why does it get left?" Right? We're like, "Oh, there are some people that we just can't change them. That's just how they are." And I know I have done that too, right? So it's not to, like, put it down, like, there are times where it's like, "Oh my god, this person is so committed to this idea that they have, and getting them to behave differently feels really hard.
Mhm.
And then what are we left with, right? We're left with, we have one person who's non-compliant, and then there's like a little culture, like a bubble of culture that kind of develops around them, where people are like, well, that team is kind of like low functioning because they're not collaborating, and people are kind of like depressed on that, in that group. I see that happen all the time. So then the question is, if we get better, right, and I think this is often for human resources and supervisors, of
Mhm.
like pulling people aside to and saying like, we can't afford non-compliance. Your non-compliance is actually costing us like time and labor for me, for the
Mm.
system, and we've invested all of this money. You not doing this, you not modeling this, you resisting this is actually like, it's like a $400,000 liability or whatever, right? And if
I
we
feel like
hold
we need
it,
to put that right up in the show notes, because I feel like people are like, "Oh, yeah, that is how you hold accountability in a way that completely makes sense," you know?
yeah, and if we can just see it even for ourselves, right? If I take, oh, this person is not behaving the way I want leaders in my organization to behave. And if I'm like, what is that costing me, right? In that micro moment, I think, well, it'll be like a really hard conversation, and the emotional labor of it feels exhausting.
Mm.
And so let me just let it go.
Yeah.
And I, as the person in charge, am less impacted by their bad behavior. So I see it, it kind of feels like nails on a chalkboard to me, but I'm willing to let it go. But if I can quantify, like, what is it actually going to cost me in the long run? And I can tell you, every time I've let one of those go by, it has cost us a lot. You know, we're a small
Mm.
organization. We don't have a lot of resources for extra things.
Yeah.
It costs us a lot. It costs us a lot in people's time, energy, emotional health. The relational trust of our people is actually like, it's cost savings. It's life affirming. It's efficiency building. It's where our resiliency comes from. And if I don't do that cost analysis correctly for myself, I will focus on the short-term costs, and like it'll escalate, and it's not worth it. And so like
Mm.
we get to say, what is it worth it to us to build our muscles in courageous conversation, and to say, no, this is not okay. You have to shift this behavior. And if I don't see change in the next 2 weeks or 3 months or whatever, um we're going to have another conversation about this. And this goes into we're going to move into a disciplinary track. And it's why, if I'm like, I want to see change in 3 months, what do I need to see change in 2 weeks that tells me we're on the path to change in 3 months? Because nobody just shifts, right? So that it's like they all kind of get interconnected.
Yeah, and making it really clear too, and really naming what it is that you want to see. Super, super helpful. And I can imagine some of the listeners who are listening right now going like, "Let me just pull you into our office real quick so you can." Um, and this work is really hard. We get it. Prior to jumping on, Sangeeta and I was talking. We're like, the climate is it is it is it is bad right now, and we even thought about like what would happen if like they come for us, Sangeeta, and we believe in this work. We need to do this, so we're doing it. And so for those of you who are out there and you're having these moments where you're like, we're here with you. So tell us what you think. Drop your comments, and then if this is something you want us to continue to talk on, and we can do many, 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 many more episodes on this particular topic. Thank you so much, you all. Until the next time.
We hope this conversation provided helpful insight and inspired you to create a more inclusive and liberated workplace. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Your support makes a huge difference in helping us reach more listeners like you. We love to hear your thoughts on today's topic. Connect with us on social media and drop a comment. You can find all the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.